Have you ever really looked at a penny? I mean, really looked at one. It's a funny little thing, isn't it? We find them in our pockets, under sofa cushions, and sometimes just lying on the sidewalk, ignored by nearly everyone. It's easy to think they're not worth much, and in a way, you'd be right. It costs more to make a penny than a penny is actually worth. But if you stop for a moment and consider the journey of that small copper-coated disc, you'll find it's not just a coin, it's a time capsule. It's a tiny piece of a story that stretches back thousands of years, a story filled with kings, empires, pirates, and the everyday business of being human. It's a story about us. That little coin is the direct descendant of some of the most important innovations in human history. Before coins, how did you buy a loaf of bread? Perhaps you traded a chicken for it. But what if the baker didn't want a chicken? What if he wanted some wool, and you were a chicken farmer? It was all terribly inconvenient. The invention of money, and specifically the small, durable, and widely accepted copper coin, changed everything. It allowed for a type of commerce and a level of societal complexity that was simply impossible before. It wasn't just about buying things, it was about building civilizations, funding armies, and spreading ideas across the known world. Think about this. The very copper in that coin might have come from a mine that was first worked by the Romans. Or it could have been part of a cannon on a 17th century warship before being melted down and repurposed. The history of copper is a history of recycling and reuse on a grand multi-millennial scale. Every copper coin is a tiny monument to human ingenuity, trade, and our endless quest for a convenient way to get what we want. It's a link to every merchant who ever haggled in a dusty bazaar, and every emperor who ever stamped his face on a piece of metal to declare, "I am in charge here." So, the next time you find a penny, don't just see it as 1 cent. See it for what it is, the end of a very, very long story. A story that began not with a perfectly round, machine-stamped disc, but with simple, lumpy pieces of a remarkable red metal. A metal that, for reasons we'll soon discover, was almost destined to become the world's first pocket money. This isn't just the story of a coin, it's a short history of how we learned to trade, to trust, and to build the world we live in today. One small copper piece at a time. It's a much bigger deal than you might think. Long before anyone had the bright idea to make a coin, people had a fascination with copper. And why wouldn't they? It was one of the very first metals our ancestors figured out how to work with. You could find it just lying around in some places, in its pure native form. It was this wonderfully shiny reddish-brown stuff that you could hammer into different shapes without it breaking. This was a revelation. For people who had only ever known stone, wood, and bone, this was like discovering magic. You could make tools, ornaments, and all sorts of useful things. This period was so transformative that we now call it the Copper Age. The journey from a useful metal to a form of money was a slow and messy one. At first, trade was all about bartering, as we've discussed. But as societies grew, they needed something a little more standardized. So people started using lumps of metal as a medium of exchange. In places like ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, around 5,000 years ago, people would trade with bits of copper or bronze, which is mostly copper mixed with a little tin. They didn't have coins yet. Instead, they had rough rings, blades, or just shapeless ingots. To make a purchase, you'd have to weigh the metal on a scale. It was better than trading chickens, but still a bit of a hassle. Imagine going to the market in ancient Babylon. You want to buy some dates. You don't pull out a wallet, you pull out a bag of metal bits. You and the merchant would haggle over the price, then you'd carefully place your copper pieces on one side of a balance scale, and the merchant would place stone weights on the other. It was a precise but slow process. This system, based on weight, is where we get the names of many currencies, like the British pound, which originally meant a pound of silver. For everyday folks, though, silver and gold were far too valuable. Copper was the metal of the masses. This early use of copper as a form of currency set the stage for one of the biggest leaps forward in economic history. People were getting used to the idea that a piece of metal had an inherent, agreed-upon value. It didn't matter if you were a farmer, a potter, or a scribe. You knew that a certain weight of copper could get you a certain amount of grain or oil. The system worked because copper was durable. It was relatively scarce but not impossibly rare, and it could be divided into smaller pieces. The only thing missing was a guarantee of its weight and purity. That final, crucial step was just around the corner. The big moment, the invention of the coin as we know it, happened around the 7th century BC in a kingdom called Lydia, in what is now modern-day Turkey. The Lydians were clever people. They figured out that weighing metal for every single transaction was a dreadful waste of time. So, they hit upon a brilliant idea. Why not make pieces of metal that were a standard weight and purity? And to prove that they were official, the king could stamp them with his own seal. This stamp was a guarantee. It said, "I, the king, promise that this piece of metal is exactly what it claims to be." And just like that, the coin was born. The very first coins were actually made from a natural alloy of gold and silver called electrum. But the idea quickly spread, and it wasn't long before rulers realized they needed coins for smaller, everyday transactions. Gold and silver were fine for buying a chariot or a plot of land, but they were useless for buying a loaf of bread or a jug of wine. You'd need a sliver of gold so tiny you'd lose it in a breeze. This is where our old friend copper stepped onto the stage. It was the perfect material for low-value coins. It was cheap, it was plentiful, and it was easy to work with. So, ancient Greek city-states began minting their own copper and bronze coins. These weren't just functional pieces of money. They were works of art and propaganda. Each city stamped its coins with its own unique symbol. Athens had the owl of Athena. Corinth had Pegasus, the winged horse. A person's pockets would be filled with a veritable zoo of mythological creatures. These images weren't just pretty pictures. They were a way of advertising the city's identity and power. When you used an Athenian coin in a foreign port, you were spreading the fame and influence of Athens. The humble copper coin became a tiny, traveling billboard. For the average person in ancient Greece, copper coins were their entire financial world. They were used in the agora, the bustling marketplace, to buy fish, olives, pottery, and sandals. They were used to pay for entry to the theater or to make a small offering at a temple. These coins made life infinitely more convenient. They allowed for a dynamic, fast-paced economy where even the poorest citizens could participate. The value of a copper coin was tied to the value of the metal itself, so people trusted it. It was real, tangible wealth you could hold in your hand, a far cry from the abstract numbers in a bank account today. If the Greeks invented the copper coin, the Romans perfected it and spread it across the entire known world. The Roman Empire was a gigantic, well-oiled machine, and that machine ran on money. Lots and lots of money. To manage their vast economy, the Romans developed a sophisticated and standardized system of coinage. At the top were the gold aureus and the silver denarius. But the real workhorses of the Roman economy were the bronze and copper coins. The most famous of these were the large, heavy bronze sestertius and the smaller copper as. These were the coins of daily life for hundreds of millions of people. When a Roman legionary received his pay, a portion of it would be in these base metal coins. He would then spend them in the market of whatever town he was stationed in, from the misty shores of Britain to the desert sands of Syria. This is how Roman coins, and Roman influence, traveled. A farmer in Gaul might be paid for his grain with a sestertius featuring the portrait of Emperor Augustus. He might then use that same coin to buy a tool from a traveling merchant, who might then use it to pay for a room at an inn hundreds of miles away. The coins connected every corner of the empire in a tangible economic web. Roman copper coins were also a powerful tool for imperial propaganda. In an age without television or the internet, how did an emperor let his subjects know what he looked like, or what great victories he had won? He stamped it on the money. Each new emperor would issue coins with his own portrait. The reverse side would often commemorate a military victory, the construction of a new building like the Colosseum, or a gift of grain to the people. These coins were a constant reminder to everyone, from the senator in Rome to the peasant in Egypt, of who was in charge and how powerful he was. As the Roman Empire began to decline, so did the quality of its coinage. To pay for endless wars and lavish spending, emperors began to debase the currency. They would reduce the amount of precious metal in the gold and silver coins, and issue more and more copper coins that were smaller and lighter than they used to be. This led to rampant inflation. People lost faith in the money, and the economy began to crumble. The fate of the humble copper coin was intricately linked to the fate of the empire itself. When the coins became worthless, the glue holding the empire together began to dissolve. After the fall of Rome, Europe plunged into a period we often call the Dark Ages. Trade collapsed, great cities shrank, and life became very local. For a while, the use of coinage dwindled, and people often went back to bartering. But you can't keep a good idea down. As kingdoms began to form and stabilize, the need for money returned. The most important coin of the medieval period was the silver penny. However, for most people, a whole silver penny was still a lot of money. To make smaller purchases, these pennies were often physically cut into halves or quarters, creating half pennies and farthings, or fourthings. As trade revived and towns grew, the need for official small change coins became pressing. Cutting up pennies was messy and inaccurate. So, kings and local lords began to issue their own copper and low-grade silver coins, often called bracteates or billion coins. These were the pennies, groats, and farthings of the Middle Ages. They were often thin, crudely stamped, and the quality varied enormously from one place to another. A coin from one feudal lord might not be accepted in the lands of his rival, which made long-distance trade a very complicated business. It was a confusing patchwork of local currencies. Making these coins was a laborious process. A metal worker, known as a moneyer, would start with a sheet of copper or silver alloy. He would cut out a round blank and place it between two dies, metal stamps with the coin's design carved into them. Then, he would strike the top die with a heavy hammer. Whack, and you had a coin. This hammering process is why they are often irregularly shaped, and the designs can be off-center. It was a physically demanding job, and the quality of the coin depended entirely on the skill and strength of the moneyer. For centuries, this was how all of Europe's small change was made. These little copper and billion coins were the lifeblood of the medieval market. They allowed a farmer to sell a few eggs, a pilgrim to buy a souvenir badge, or a serf to pay a small church tithe. They represented a new kind of freedom. While most people's lives were still tied to the land, money offered a little bit of flexibility and opportunity. You could save up a few coins to buy a pig, or perhaps even, over a lifetime, enough to purchase a small piece of land. The humble medieval penny, for all its crude appearance, held within it the promise of a world beyond simple subsistence farming. When European explorers and colonists sailed across the Atlantic to the Americas, they brought their customs, their diseases, and their money with them. The early colonies were a chaotic mix of English, Spanish, French, and Dutch currencies. A merchant in Boston might have to deal with Spanish silver dollars, pieces of 8 English shillings, and French écus all in the same day. To make matters worse, there was a chronic shortage of small change. Official coins from the home countries were scarce, so the colonists had to get creative. They used everything from nails to tobacco to wampum, those are shell beads made by Native Americans, as currency. To solve this problem, some of the colonies decided to take matters into their own hands and mint their own coins. One of the very first was the Haga money of Bermuda, issued around 1616. But the first copper coin struck on the mainland of North America was likely the Massachusetts pine tree copper of 1652. These early colonial coins were technically illegal, as minting coins was a right reserved for the King of England. But, the king was a long way away, and the colonists desperately needed a way to buy and sell things. So, they did it anyway, often putting a false date on the coins to avoid trouble. After the United States won its independence, one of the first things the new nation had to do was create its own currency system. The Coinage Act of 1792 established the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia and authorized the production of America's first official coins. The very first coin to be struck for circulation was the Fugio cent in 1787, even before the mint was formally established. It was made of pure copper and featured a picture of the sun and a sundial with the motto, Fugio, I fly, and on the other side 13 linked circles with the words, We are one. It was a powerful symbol for a new nation. These early American cents were big, heavy pieces of copper, about the size of a modern $50. They were designed to contain 1 cent's worth of copper, so their value was tied directly to the metal they were made from. For the first few decades of the nation's history, these large cents were the primary coin used by ordinary Americans for their daily business. They were used to buy everything from a newspaper to a pint of ale. These coins, passed from hand to hand, helped to knit the new country together, creating a shared economic identity and fulfilling the promise on that very first cent, we are one. We are. Out of all the elements on the periodic table, why did copper become the go-to metal for small denomination coins for thousands of years? It wasn't an accident. Copper just happens to have the perfect combination of properties for the job. First and foremost is its availability. Copper is relatively abundant in the Earth's crust. It's not as common as iron or aluminum, but it's far more common than gold or silver. This made it inexpensive enough to be used for coins that represented a small amount of value. You could mint billions of them without breaking the royal bank. Another key factor is its durability. Copper is a tough metal. It doesn't rust like iron does. Instead, it develops a protective green or brown layer called a patina when it's exposed to the elements. This patina actually shields the metal underneath from further corrosion. This is why ancient copper coins can survive in the ground for 2,000 years and still be recognizable. A coin made of iron would have long since rusted into a worthless flake. Copper's resistance to decay means that the value it represents is stable and long-lasting. You could bury a pot of copper coins and dig them up a generation later, confident they'd still be good. Copper is also wonderfully easy to work with. It has a relatively low melting point, which meant that even ancient metalworkers with simple furnaces could melt it down and cast it. It's also quite soft and malleable, which means it can be easily stamped with intricate designs, like the face of an emperor or the owl of Athens. This process, called minting, would be much more difficult with harder metals. Furthermore, copper readily forms alloys with other metals, like tin to make bronze, or zinc to make brass. This allowed governments to tweak the composition of their coins to control costs and durability. Finally, copper has a distinctive and attractive color. Its warm, reddish-brown hue makes it instantly recognizable. You can't mistake it for silver or gold. This was important in a world where many people were illiterate. They could recognize the value of a coin by its color and size alone. For all these reasons, its availability, durability, workability, and distinctive appearance, copper was the natural choice. It was, and in many ways still is, the perfect metal for the people's money. It was the humble, reliable foundation upon which global commerce was built. Whenever something is a part of people's daily lives for thousands of years, it's bound to gather a few stories, myths, and superstitions around it. And copper coins are no exception. Perhaps the most famous superstition is that of the lucky penny. You know the rhyme, find a penny, pick it up, all the day you'll have good luck. But why? Where did that idea come from? Some people think it dates back to ancient times when metals like copper were believed to be gifts from the gods, imbued with properties that could protect against evil. Finding a piece of this magical metal was therefore a sign of good fortune. Another fascinating legend involves the dead. In ancient Greece and Rome, it was customary to place a copper or bronze coin in the mouth, or sometimes over the eyes, of a deceased person before burial. This coin was known as Charon's obol. In their mythology, Charon was the ferryman of the underworld, who transported the souls of the dead across the river Styx to the afterlife. The coin was his payment. Without it, a soul would be doomed to wander the shores for 100 years. Archaeologists have found countless skeletons from this period, with coins still in their skulls, a testament to how deeply people held this belief. Copper coins have also played a role in folk medicine and magic. For centuries, people believed that copper had healing properties. Some thought that wearing a copper bracelet could ward off rheumatism and arthritis. Others believed that holding a copper coin against a wound could prevent infection. While there is a grain of scientific truth to this, copper is antimicrobial and can kill certain bacteria and viruses on contact. The old folk remedies were more about faith than science. The belief that copper was a pure and protective metal made it a key ingredient in all sorts of charms and amulets. Even the simple act of flipping a coin to make a decision has its roots in the Roman world. Roman children would play a game called Navia aut caput, ship or head, flipping a coin and calling out which side would land face up. On one side of the coin was often the prow of a ship, and on the other was the head of the emperor or a deity. This simple game of chance, played with a common copper as, has survived for 2 millennia, and is still used today to decide everything from who kicks off in a football game to who has to do the dishes. It's just another way this ancient metal remains part of our modern lives. So, where does all this history leave the copper coin today? In a world of credit cards, digital payments, and cryptocurrencies, it's easy to think that the physical coin is on its last legs. And it's true that their role has changed. The American penny, for instance, hasn't been made of solid copper since 1857. For a long time, it was bronze, and since 1982, it has been made mostly of zinc, with just a very thin coating of copper. As we've noted, it now costs more than 2 cents to produce a 1-cent coin. Several countries like Canada and Australia have already stopped minting their lowest denomination coins altogether. And yet, the penny hangs on. Why? Part of it is simple nostalgia and tradition. The Lincoln cent has been with us for more than a century. It feels like a part of the American landscape. But there are practical arguments too. Charities rely on coin donations. Getting rid of the penny would require all prices to be rounded to the nearest nickel, which some fear would lead to a small but widespread increase in prices, a sort of hidden rounding tax. So, for now, the presses at the US Mint continue to stamp out billions of new copper-plated cents every single year. Even as its role in our pockets shrinks, copper's importance in our world has never been greater. It is the metal of the electrical age. The same properties that made it good for coins, durability and conductivity, though for coins, its monetary value was key, make it essential for modern technology. Every smartphone, every computer, every electric car, and every mile of cable that makes up the internet is filled with copper wiring. It conducts electricity and data with incredible efficiency. In a way, copper has simply transitioned from carrying monetary value to carrying the information that drives our global digital economy. So, the legacy of the copper coin is not really ending, it's just evolving. It started as a lump of magical red metal, became the first money for the masses, served as the backbone of empires, and helped build new nations. It taught humanity the language of commerce and value. Today, that same metal forms the physical infrastructure of our digital world. The next time you tap your phone to pay for a coffee, just remember the long, winding journey that led to that moment. It's a journey that started with a simple, shiny, and profoundly important piece of metal, the humble copper coin. Its story is far from over.